he'd managed to convince himself that the only way to get out of this situation as the victim is to kill me and say that it was self-defense. Now, that thought process for him and that conversation lasted a good half an hour where he was planning my death. Things were just fun. It was like having a housemate, but that you were getting closer to, sort of thing. So it felt really sort of natural. I was getting a lot, because I was suffering quite heavily with anxiety at the time as well. I was getting a lot of encouragement from him, a lot of support in that. Just he seemed to always know what to say, and the long nights talking till God knows what time in the morning, and sometimes through into the day, just those kinds of experiences. And he did a lot for my self-esteem at the beginning there. Lockdown hit, and I remember pointing out to him, actually, I bet this is going to cause a lot of domestic violence issues. People who are in a place that they can't get out of now, and they've got and even partners who might not have been inclined to be in that way are now all of a sudden finding that they're responding in ways that are not helpful to either of them, and things like that. And we would have these sorts of discussions that we would have at length, quite philosophical, sort of, put the world to rights kind of discussions. And it never really occurred to him that he was going in that direction as well. So it was just after lockdown started did I start to think, after the police mentioned to me with one incident where they were called out because things got a bit too much, and it was when the police mentioned to me, is this a domestic violence issue? I said, no, not at all, of course not. And it was afterwards I was starting to think, it's like that dun 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 moment where you think, could I let this, is that, no. He tended to take the victim role, and sometimes I would find myself saying, who is this performance for? What it is that there's just the two of us in this room, and the story that you're telling me about the incidents that have just happened that's not what's just happened. When he was trying to tell me, how I'm ungrateful for all the support he's been giving me, and how this is an excuse for this kind of behaviour, and because it was so unbelievable, I started to believe it. I would say, maybe I'm not that easy to live with, or maybe it's not, this situation is in isolation, and then that situation was because of this thing, and somebody wouldn't make that up. Somebody wouldn't try and convince me, who was the only other party to it, of a certain way, and without, maybe it's my interpretation of it. The only time that we were allowed any doors on any of the frames, because he had an issue with privacy, what was going on behind the doors, why do you need to shut the door, why do you need to be in another room without, what you're hiding, kind of deal. Which I can't believe I let get that far, to be honest, but it did, and it was very slow burn. So by the time it got to a point where the doors were taken off the hinges, I hadn't really been able to step back and say, this is not normal, because it was such a slow process. So the bathroom door was the only door that was allowed to have a door on it for obvious reasons. And so I managed to lock myself in there one of these incidents where I was having a panic attack and I just needed to get away, and I can only assume he thought I was just trying to get attention. That's how he was packaging it, but his friend could see that this was not the case. And I locked myself in the bathroom, and he kicked the bathroom door in. Now, I say he was taller than me, he wasn't particularly larger than me, and so he must have kicked it with some force to kick it off. And when he did so, this mirror that was on the windowsill behind the door smashed. That was my fault too, for locking the door. So then I ran into the bedroom, and by this point he'd walked away, come back, walked away and come back several times, like obviously had too much to say for himself. And one of these times I just pretended to be asleep. And he went back into the living room, ranting and raving to his friend. I could hear him, what he was saying, and I was still pretending to be asleep. He'd managed to convince himself that the only way to get out of this situation as the victim is to kill me and say that it was self-defense. Now, that thought process for him and that conversation lasted a good half an hour, where he was planning my death. He said, you need to wake up because the police are coming. I said, okay. My assumption was to come and see him about the incident a couple of nights before. They're coming to arrest you. I said, why? He said, because I told them, and this is because he was trying to say it's because they sedated him, that's why he told them, that you had tied me down and deprived me of food for a long time. I was like, why did you tell them that? He goes, I don't know, I was sedated, I didn't know what, I'm going to tell them that you didn't, which he eventually did, but they can't drop something like that. And so later that evening, I just, I thought, I can't, I've nearly ended up dead and in prison in one couple of days, and this has been getting worse over the past few months now. What's the net? Am I actually going to end up one of those two things? If you get independent advice from a charity that doesn't know you or your situation, and they hear your story, they'll be able to give you a bit of a clearer idea about the things that you might be questioning. And also you'll be able to take their advice on board because there's no bias there. So even if it turns out that it's not domestic abuse, even if it turns out that all you needed to do was get some perspective on a situation that you may be confused about, getting that advice from somebody who doesn't know you and you don't know them, all they know is the story that you've got to tell them, that could give you the answer that you're looking for, one way or another. And they will sit and listen. They won't be trying to talk to you as though you're their, son or daughter or mother or child. They will be talking to you as you're this person giving them this story, and their responses and advice will be based on this story.